let's talk about Nintendo's censorship policy. During the 8 and 16-bit eras, Nintendo had a very strict censorship policy. Under this policy, games weren't allowed to have any gore, foul language, nudity, domestic violence, nationalistic or religious references, drugs, alcohol, and anything else along those lines. Because of this, so many games had undergone quite a few changes upon North American localization, and some games, such as Devil World, never made it to North America at all. The early 90s had proven to be a very controversial time for the video game industry, as more violent and suggestive titles such as Mortal Kombat, Doom, and Night Trap were released. Despite all this, Nintendo refused to back down on their censorship policy, but it became very costly for them. One of the biggest examples was with the Super Nintendo release of Mortal Kombat. The blood was replaced with sweat, and the gory fatalities like Sub-Zero Spine Rip were replaced with gore-free finishing moves. The Genesis version of the game, on the other hand, kept the blood and gore, and because of this, the Genesis version outsold the Super Nintendo version 4-1. As a response to all these controversial games being released, the organization known as the Entertainment Software Rating Board was formed in 1994 as a means to identify which games were suitable for kids and which ones were not. Because of the ESRB, Nintendo felt that their censorship policy was no longer necessary, and games like Mortal Kombat 2 came to the Super Nintendo completely uncensored. Now, some of you may be wondering, hey, Coffee Man, what's with the history lesson? Well, that's because I'm going to be reviewing one of the games that got the brunt of Nintendo's censorship policy, Wolfenstein 3D. But before we get started on the review, there's something I need to address here. In my last video, I realized that I snubbed Wolfenstein 3D's significance quite a bit by saying that although it was released before Doom, it was Doom that made the first-person shooter concept popular, and without it, a lot of the games we have now wouldn't exist today. Let me clarify something here. Yes, while Doom did make the first-person shooter concept popular, Wolfenstein 3D did have a large helping hand in it. If Wolfenstein 3D didn't get the reception it did, we wouldn't have had Doom. We wouldn't have even had Medal of Honor, which was a clear inspiration of both games. So take what I said in my last video with a grain of salt. With that said, on with the review. Now, I played the Super Nintendo version of Doom before I played this, so believe me, I had no expectations for this version of Wolfenstein. The heavy censorship sure didn't help matters, but you can't fully judge a game until you've played it, so let's take a look. Now, like I said earlier, this game got the full brunt of Nintendo's censorship policy, and oh boy did it get the full damn brunt of it. You will see changes left, right, and center. One of the big changes that Nintendo of America ordered was that all references to Nazi Germany and World War II in general had to be removed, which means that all the flags and Nazi symbols were changed. Hell, if you looked at the cover, you'd think you'd be going to Vietnam. The Germans now speak English. Both the United States and Germany were renamed. Hitler was renamed, and his iconic mustache was removed. I did happen to notice one slip-up during the first mission's briefing. While the US was renamed the Republic and Germany the Master State, and Hitler's name was changed to Stopmeister. Yes, Stopmeister. I know, it's a stupid name, just roll with it. Anyway, you are told you have to infiltrate an enemy base. In Dresden. Yeah, if you know your history or European geography, you'll know where Dresden is. The censorship doesn't end there, though. Most of the blood has been removed, although you will see some on BJ's face when he's below 25% health. The dogs have been changed into giant rats. Pretty ironic that it's okay to shoot people, but not dogs. The magazines don't look like they have bullets in them, and Hitler, I mean Stopmeister, gets a G-rated death. And I thought the censorship in the Australian version of Left 4 Dead 2 was bad. There are a couple of additions. The mutants appear in every episode past episode 2, and 2 new weapons have been added. A rocket launcher and a flamethrower. I guess blowing up and burning people must also be okay. Moving on, this port has all 6 episodes in it, but the number of levels has been heavily cut down, giving us 3 or 4 levels per episode. The levels have also been simplified, making the game more straightforward. This is a pretty sensible move considering the amount of memory a Super Nintendo cartridge has. That, and I'm gonna be honest here, as much as I love the original Wolfenstein, getting lost was a bit of a pain. Now, although the number of levels has been cut down, 24 levels is still a plentiful amount. And although the levels have been simplified, they're still pretty lengthy. Which brings me to my next point. Unfortunately, the game does not have a save feature, but it does have a password feature, which is pretty good. It's not like that other game, which has neither a save feature nor a password feature. Now, as for the graphics, the in-game guns do look better than in the original game, but as for the in-game graphics, pixelation is still an issue. It's not quite as bad as Doom's, but when looking at long distances, it can still be a bit hard to see. At least you can make out where the enemy is, unlike this! The controls. Surprisingly, the game's controls are pretty smooth. They don't lag at all, like that other game. The AI is also pretty responsive. All an enemy needs to do is hear a gunshot and they'll come looking for you, which can be a bit of a challenge, so hopefully you have a machine gun or a chain gun with you. As for the music, I'm gonna have to say, I never found Wolfenstein 3D's soundtrack to be quite memorable. But this version had a pretty good rendition of the Wolfenstein soundtrack. In fact, I think it's even better than the originals. Here, have a listen. So, what do I think of this game overall? Well, to put it simply, it's not a bad port of Wolfenstein, although when compared to other ports, it's far from the best. The gameplay and the music are pretty good, and it's neat that you've got 2 extra weapons, but still, the pixelation and the heavy censorship still hurt it. But as a Super Nintendo game, it's pretty decent. I'm the Coffee Man, and I hope you've enjoyed this review.